What is new, Democracy Crew? We are here in our second installment of doing Democracy Daily. I am your co-host, Caitlin, with our co-host.
I'm Logan.
And today we're just going to be talking about democracy in the everyday life. I'm talking about democratic values like accountability and transparency and how we can see that in our government. So we can start off talking about the places that we have seen in holding these democratic values. I know in our class we went to the state legislature, county clerk, city council, all that jazz where we have seen democratic values be played out. And you can see in the news just the federal government and how their democratic values play out. So yeah, I think first we'll want to talk about our visit to the legislature. I'll hand this one over to you because I'm already talking too much.
Yeah, we saw and learned a lot about democratic values when we were visiting Santa Fe and the state legislature. It was really interesting, a really fun experience. Today, since we're focusing on accountability and transparency, we'll just talk about those two things. In particular, we saw a lot of that in Santa Fe in things like the committee meetings and the floor sessions when the legislators were asking for further clarification, and the committee meetings when they were breaking down each line of the budget, things like that. And the most important things about these things being transparent and accountable is the fact that they're open and accessible to the public. Like the committee meeting, there's Zoom recordings and things like that, and the public is free to just go in and sit in those meetings, as well as the legislature being streamed online and having the recordings accessible for people to go back and review after. Those things that make it possible for the public to participate, even though they're not an elected member, is one of the things that is really important for accountability and transparency.
Yeah, and I think it's good, like you briefly mentioned, like public comment too. We were sitting in on one of the committee meetings, and at some point in the meeting they asked for public comment, and there was a whole long line of people who wanted to give their opinions on whatever they were debating about in the committee. So I think it's important because that's like the beginning point on how legislation gets passed, and it's important to have the community who these legislations are actually affecting, they can have an opinion on what's being passed through the legislature.
Yeah, one of the things that we witnessed for that there was a session of public comment for was a bill about improving internet access to rural communities. And people who work for companies that service those communities were able to speak, as well as people who actually lived there would have had the opportunity to speak and give their input as well.
Yeah. And, these values of accountability and transparency, we can see them, but even in the state legislature, they have their flaws, of course. Not everybody has the time to go in at 9 a.m. to go sit in on a committee meeting. So I think making those meetings and even floor sessions more accessible to people's schedules, I think that would be good to improve transparency. But then again, I think they're doing all they could do given their circumstances.
And one thing that does help with that too is the access of virtually attending those meetings too, which does exist.
Yeah. I think there's also a barrier to that as well, because I don't think a lot of people know that you can just go online and see these committee meetings. Because I know I didn't, before going to the legislature and seeing people give their public comment through Zoom. I think they can do a better job at improving their marketing towards these meetings and stuff like that. But that's just me being picky.
Yeah, it definitely a lot of things about democracy isn't widely known by the general public, you could say, which is something that we should definitely work to improve on.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power.
Say it. And I think this directly ties into the next level of government that they wanted to talk about, which was the city council. So we had went to a city council meeting a couple weeks back where we saw the council members, the mayor, the chiefs and stuff like that all talk about various budgeting for the city. And yeah.
Yeah, and the most important thing about those meetings too is the same thing, that they had the opportunity for public comment. Like just the general city council meeting that we went to, it had, honestly, the majority of the time was public comment, because they had people in, it was a process where you could sit on the end of the aisle and an usher would come up and offer you, you'd have 2 or 3 minutes to speak your public comment, and the counselors could respond. And it's a good way for the public to give their feedback on things that are happening more locally that are really, really directly impacting them.
Yeah. I know when we had went, I don't remember if it was the first or the second time, but they were talking just about like the budget, and it's just really interesting to see how little people were there, but such impactful things are being discussed, like in terms of like infrastructure and, you know, after school programs, stuff like that, that helps so many people in Las Cruces, but it doesn't seem like many people show up, which is another issue of scheduling conflicts, because these capsules were started at noon or 1 o'clock, and that's, you know, prime time for people to be at work or at school. So there's this barrier between like the common person and the city council. So I think, although it's good that they have that accessible to the public, I think that they need to improve on making it available for everyone.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The city council definitely is very important though too. And I think it's something I didn't realize until we went to one of those meetings, how important even the smallest, lowest level of government really is. And I'm sure that's something that a lot of people also don't realize, how impactful the city council is to their everyday life, maybe more so than some even state and federal policies.
Yeah, for sure. And because Logan and I were both from Albuquerque, so I'm really interested to see like the differences between the two city councils, because I think a lot of stuff for Albuquerque, at least, it gets blamed on like, you know, higher officials like at the state level, just because Albuquerque is one of the biggest cities in the state. So I think I would be interested to learn more about the city council in Albuquerque and what they're doing to improve like some of the pressing issues there, like homelessness, strike use, violence across the city.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and hopefully more people can take advantage of the fact that these local levels of government are very transparent with the way they spend their money and the actions they take. It's important that all of these meetings are open to the public.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be like a reoccurring theme throughout all levels of government, just like they have these systems in place to encourage transparency and accountability, but it's just not feasible or unknown to the common person. And, you know, your everyday citizen doesn't have the opportunity to go to these meetings to make their voice heard.
Yeah. So those are really important. The third level that we wanted to talk about for transparency, especially, and accountability, is something that we toured a couple weeks ago, and the county clerk in the election warehouse here in Doñana County.
Yeah, I think there was one of the most accountable and transparent level of government that I personally saw. So whenever we got a tour of the warehouse, she was also telling us about like the process of elections and all the safeguards they have to just completely eliminate any possibility of election interference. So I know one of the main things that pops into my head was the fact that their computers in the warehouse aren't connected to any internet. So there's like zero possibility of somebody like hacking into the computers and, you know, changing numbers for elections. And another thing is just like they file like everything and they keep everything in the warehouse. Like they keep every single paper ballot, and like if they, like for example, if they get like raided by the FBI to, you know, investigate any election fraud, they have every single election ballot there to show that, like to show every single ballot and that they didn't rig any election.
Yeah, it was important to see how many safeguards there are of accountability so that one person can't destroy an entire election, and that really at every step of the process everything is double checked, and if it has to be, it's double counted, and how thorough they are to a very, very extreme level on making sure that elections are safe and secure. And the transparency comes into play too, because they have a room at the elections warehouse where people can go and watch them count the votes on election day.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to mention. Yeah, I forgot what they called that room, but yeah, people usually go there. It's open to the public too, and you know, even though we're like students at NMSU, we still got the opportunity to just tour the whole warehouse too, which is great because I'm sure, you know, just everyday common people can do the same.
And it's something unique, I'm sure, that there's an elections warehouse in every county, every state. But until we took that tour again, I didn't know it existed.
Yeah. So if you know any election deniers or anybody who thinks their county is corrupt, I would encourage you to encourage them to go visit their county clerk and talk to them and understand that they're just real people, just like me and you. Like we're all people who want to see the better in our community and try to have bipartisan views when it comes to elections.
Yeah, and bipartisanship is another important thing that they mentioned. For election day, they have a Democrat and a Republican in the room certifying all the results to make sure that there is no partisanship involved. And although the county clerk is an elected position, most of the positions in the clerk's office are just regular paid employees. So they're not being installed through elections to rig anything by major parties company. They're just people who are trying to do their jobs.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you know, the fact that there are Republicans and Democrats overseeing these elections. She also mentioned that there are people coming from out of state and even like out of the country to see these elections happening and make sure that, you know, there's nothing conspiratorial going on, if that's a word.
Yeah, so it's important that we recognize all of the accountability that goes into the elections process, especially. But one more level we didn't talk about of government is the federal level. And that's a place right now where it feels like there isn't a lot of accountability.
Yeah, I mean, personally, me and him were talking about this earlier, just the fact that our executive government has been doing so many things undemocratically, and they're doing things from a position of power where, you know, not every American agrees on. One thing that comes to my mind is the tariffs that were enacted. They were enacted since think early 2025, and it has had some pretty bad consequences on our economy and inflation. And it was only till I think about a month or two ago where the Supreme Court declared that it's unconstitutional since, President Donald Trump didn't go through Congress to pass these tariffs or anything. And I think that has an issue with accountability because it took over a year for any level of government to come and say, like, hey, you can't do this. This is not in your enumerated powers.
Another thing that is really important to, I think, acknowledge right now is that it feels like a lot of people within the federal government act without consequences. At least it feels like that to just a regular citizen super far away from it all. But the important thing in that context is that the leaders of the federal government are employed by the public of America. And really it is our job to hire and fire them come the next election. So, and depending on opinions, of course, but the public is in control who is elected. So I think that the act of serving the public and, more importantly, being honest to the public is something that I value a lot more than I feel like I see.
Yeah, I agree. I know that there's definitely safeguards to protecting democracy. Like, there's the impeachment process and all that, and the fact that representatives only have 2-year terms. So, there are ways to, democratically fix these issues and make sure that your voice is being heard, but it also just brings up the issue of time as well. Like, these institutions, they take so long to pass things. Like, for example, it makes me think of the government shutdown back in late 2025. It took like over a month for them to open the government back up, even though people were without a job and struggling. So I think there's this strong delay that we can see in pretty much every form of government that I think needs to be resolved. I think these things take too long, and the more time passes, the more harm is done in these negative scenarios. So I think one flaw that I see in every level of the state is the speed of things.
And all of this conversation is not to necessarily say the federal government is evil or bad. And there are definitely a lot of people who are doing good things than the federal government and trying to preserve democracy and keep it accountable and transparent.
Yeah, of course. Like, it makes me think of all the federal agencies out there, like Social Security and stuff like that, and Medicare, that are in place to help Americans and make sure that they have everything they need, regardless of, any other factors contributing to that. Yeah, and I even saw some of these helpful policies be in place whenever I was interning at Representative Gabe Vasquez's office. A lot of their staff and their constituent services really helped a lot of people get their, medical coverage back, and any delays on veteran assistance and stuff like that. So I think there are ways that the government does help and are there to provide transparency in different angles of the government.
That's definitely another thing that's not widely known, is how accessible your representatives are at any level, especially the more local you get. Sometimes they might just be even your neighbor.
Yeah.
But it's important to reach out and say how you feel to the people who represent you, because I would say more often than not, they really do care about representing the opinions of the people who are in their district.
Of course, yeah. And I think that goes for every level of government too. Like, you can go to the New Mexico legislature website and email both your representative and the system. And even like city council and city clerk, county clerk, you can just call them and even go visit their offices and see like what is being done. So I think there definitely needs to be more knowledge out there that these systems are in place too, because I think before taking this class, I knew like these things were there, but you just don't know how to interact with them, and you don't know how to get in contact with these people. And now like going into like the political realm, it's interesting just to see how easy it is to get in contact with these people that make such big decisions about your life and the things that impact everyone or in your city or county, state, country. Like you can even call your like the federal representatives, and I know whenever I worked there, I would take calls and submit any complaints or help with any casework that was needed to be done. So I think at every level, someone's going to answer your call, and someone's going to answer your email, and just be there if you show up to go see their office. So
every person who works in politics is still just a person who lives the same way we do.
Yeah.
So it's important that we use the tools available to us to try to maintain accountability and transparency.
Yeah, and I don't know how this works like across the United States, but I know like for New Mexico at least, everyone here, well, in terms of like politicians, they have been like so nice and welcoming and willing to answer any questions. And you could see in our last podcast where we interviewed 2 state representatives, and they were more than happy to, answer our questions and give their perspective on democracy. And same thing works with everyday issues in your community. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to interact with you and make your voices heard in their work and stuff like that. So I think it definitely depends on like what state you're in too, because I don't want to seem naive and say like this is how it is for all the United States. Like I'm sure there's people out there who aren't as open and willing to talk to their constituents.
But overall, I think that we learned a lot of really good stuff about accountability and transparency and why it's so important to democracy.
Yeah, for sure.
So to conclude, how do you think we can improve accountability and transparency?
I do think this goes back to what I was talking about before for accountability. I think we definitely need to improve the speed of things, any safeguards out there that are put in place to avoid any extreme things that the constituents don't want. I think there needs to be like an expedited process to do those things, and we need to stop waiting a year to finally declare that something is unconstitutional. And as far as transparency, I think timing of, your county clerks, or not county clerks, your city council meetings and state legislature committee meetings, I think those need to be at a time where, the average working American can go and see these things and put their public comment on them, because having the people's opinion and having people witness what is going on in our government would be really important to improve both accountability and transparency and allow for a more, I'd say, efficient and connected government.
Okay. Well, I think that'll wrap us up for today.
Yeah. Thank you if you made it this far into episode 2 of Doing Democracy Daily. Round of applause. Round of applause. Hopefully you learned something. I know we've learned stuff this semester. So Peace out. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. And we'll catch you on episode 3 in a couple of weeks.